When you picture an athlete's hardest day, what do you see? It's gotta be game day, right? The bright lights, the roaring crowd, that all-out physical battle. But what if I told you that for a lot of athletes, the toughest day of the week is actually on a quiet practice field long before anyone's watching? Well, we've got the data to prove it.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll dive into the absolute physical grind of a single game. Then we'll get into the science of how coaches actually manage all that stress. We'll follow a team through a whole season to see this in action. And finally, we'll look at the stuff that goes way beyond the physical grind. All right, to really get this, we need a baseline. So let's just look at the raw numbers from just one, Division I women's lacrosse game. What does it actually take to compete for 60 minutes?
Okay, first up, total distance. We're talking 4,733 meters on average. That is nearly 3 miles. Think about that. It's like running the length of 47 football fields, all while dodging defenders and cradling a stick.
But, it's not just a nice, steady jog. It's all about explosive power. During that game, an athlete will perform, on average, 124 separate sprints. Just think about that stop-and-go punishment. And it gets even more intense. It's not just sprinting in a straight line. We're also seeing an average of 51 high-intensity accelerations. That's 51 times a player has to go from 0 to 60, metaphorically speaking, bursting into a full-out sprint.
And you know what they say, what goes up must come down. For every acceleration, there's usually a deceleration. Players have to slam on the brakes, hard, about 38 times per game. That braking motion is just brutal on the joints and muscles. So yeah, the takeaway here is pretty clear. Game day is an absolute beast.
Okay, so we've established game day is insane. But here's the real puzzle. It's not about surviving one game. It's about surviving a whole season. How in the world do you manage that level of intensity week after week after week? Well, that's where the science comes in.
I mean, really think about that. How do you keep an athlete fit enough to dominate, but not so tired that they just fall apart and get injured? You can't just guess, you have to measure it. And a key way they do that is with something called the acute chronic workload ratio, or ACW. The easiest way to think about it is this. Your chronic load is the fitness foundation you've built over the last month. Your acute load is the work you're putting on top of that foundation this week. The ACW is just a number that tells you if you're building your fitness up or if you're about to make the whole thing crumble. And it really is a balancing act. If that ACWR number is too low, you're undertraining. You won't be ready for the shock of game day. But if it's too high, well, that's when you're doing way too much, way too fast, and your injury risk just skyrockets. The whole goal is to live in that perfect sweet spot right in the middle.
So all that theory is great, but what does it actually look like in the real world? Let's find out. We're going to follow a Division I women's lacrosse team through their entire 15-week season and see this tightrope walk in action. Okay, so here's a quick roadmap of the season, just so you have the lay of the land. It kicks off with preseason. The first game is in week 3. There's a really important recovery week right in the middle, and then things get crazy for conference play. Got it? Good. Now check this out. This is where it gets really interesting. In week 2, the team averaged 40 sprints in their training. Okay, fine. But the very next week, they almost tripled that to 116. This massive jump sent their ACWR for sprints soaring to 1.87, way into that overtraining danger zone. And here's the kicker. This spike happened during practice before the first game. So is this a huge mistake? Nope, not at all. It was a calculated risk. Coaches did this on purpose. They intentionally designed practices to be even more intense per minute than an actual game. They used things like small-sided games and condensed drills to force more sprinting and more changes of direction in less time, all to build a foundation of fitness that can last the whole season. And it's not just about pushing harder all the time. Look at this. In week 8, the team's total distance just plummeted to about 15,000 meters. But the very next week, it doubled to almost 31,000 meters, the highest single week of the entire season. That looks like another crazy, dangerous spike. But again, it was all part of the master plan. Week 8 was a deliberate deload week. Coaches strategically pulled everything back. They created a planned valley to let the athletes' bodies recover, adapt, and get ready for the massive peak of week 9. It just goes to show you, sometimes the smartest training is training less.
So, managing the physical load is obviously this incredibly complex science. But even the most perfect training plan can be thrown off by stuff that you can't see on a GPS tracker. Let's talk about some of the hidden things that affect how an athlete really performs. And one of those hidden factors is the research itself. The authors of this study point out something really important. There's just not a lot of sports science literature on elite female athletes. That gap, that disparity, creates a huge challenge for coaches who are trying to make the best possible decisions for their players.
And here's another huge one: sleep. We think of these athletes as being perfectly tuned machines, but get this. A major study found that over half, 52%, of elite athletes are actually classified as poor sleepers. When your body's number one recovery tool is broken, it affects everything else you do on the field.
So, let's go back to our original question. Is game day really an athlete's hardest day? Well, the data says probably not. The real grind, the most intense work, is often hidden in plain sight, happening on a Tuesday afternoon practice. And when you factor in all the other pressures, like just trying to get a good night's sleep, it becomes pretty clear that an athlete's toughest battles are almost always fought far away from the roar of the crowd.